evening, adventure fans. Welcome to another pulse-pounding episode of Storyteller Conclave. When last we saw our intrepid heroes, Sara and Robert, they had discovered a strange machine that seemed to be able to move through time. Spinning the strange contraption to life, the pair of storytellers were whisked away to the roaring 20s, a time of excitement, intrigue, and pulp adventure. Let us now join our heroes as they delve deeper into the storytelling extravaganza that is White Wolf's Adventure, Tales of the Æon Society.
Hello friends, welcome to episode 67 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game up to the next level. I am Sara.
And I am Rob.
Hello, Robert.
That was fun. That was really fun. Well done. Well
this
done.
is honestly, today's going to be a system spotlight, and we've been kind of doing these on the regular. I actually only realized it once I started writing this one that we were doing two White Wolf spotlights back to back.
Yeah, we kind of did.
We're talking about World of Darkness, and now we're talking about at least 1/3 of the Trinity, the Æonverse. As it is sometimes referred to.
Yes.
Three game systems that are intertwined with themselves, but not part of White Wolf's main line, the World of Darkness.
No, and definitely, anybody who knows about it doesn't think that that's White Wolf.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's White Wolf.
Yeah, absolutely. A pretty big departure from what they were known for.
Right.
And honestly, my favorite games that they've ever made.
But I think that happened a lot at that time period. I mean, look what Palladium did. Like, they went from hardcore fantasy to this crazy sci-fi.
Around that time. Yeah, exactly.
And then, in TMNT.
And TMNT,
yeah. I mean, it was kind of crazy how much difference...
Well, they'd done that years earlier, though.
Right.
Adventure, Tales of the Æon Society was actually published in 2001.
Okay, wow.
The whole Trinity, the whole Æonverse actually began with Æon Trinity.
Right.
The game was first called Æon, but apparently there was some legal problems because there was a property out at the time called Æon Flux.
Yes.
Which was a cartoon series that was done by Liquid Television on MTV.
Yes, and if you missed one episode, you had no idea what the hell was going on.
I got news for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't miss an episode, you had no idea what was going on.
I thought it was pretty well done.
But it was still amazing. The animation was great.
It was incredibly different for the time.
But regardless, it was originally published under the name Æon. They had some legal problems with it, so they had to back it off and call it Trinity.
Right.
And then so that was a far distant future sci-fi spacefaring sort of game with psionics.
Right.
All of your characters were kind of super powered with psionics and such like that, and you were fighting against these things called the aberrants, which were these awful, horrible, twisted mutant monstrosities that had superpowers and stuff like that. And essentially, your psychic dudes were originally created to fight these aberrants.
Correct.
Then White Wolf published my second favorite game, which is Aberrant, which told the stories of the origins of these aberrants when they were previously known as novas, which were super-powered humans that erupted these superpowers. And it was if anybody watched the show Heroes back in the day,
yeah, that was a pretty good representation.
Yeah, I had a lot of same feelings of that, where it was like ordinary dudes now have superpowers, and what do you do with that? How does that derail your life? How does that derail the world around you? And it asked a lot of good questions. The recent show, I think it's on Amazon. I'm not sure where it's broadcasting, but The Boys.
Yes.
The Boys is very much a story that could be told in the Aberrant universe,
and with the dramatic tones that are involved in it, the truths that kind of come through, that political edge, the personal gain, the egos that come with
the marketing companies that just want to monopolize a superheroed person.
Right.
So then in 2001, White Wolf published Adventure, Tales of the Æon Society,
which was a step further back.
It took place in the 1920s, and it actually shows the origins of the Æon Society itself, which is a common thread that actually runs through all three games.
Right.
And if you dig deep enough into the lore, there's actually characters that appear in all three settings.
People who
primarily
lived.
The quote-unquote big bad guy, but he's not really the big bad guy. There's there's
a relative term.
Yeah, I don't know how much it'd be spoiling to even talk about this character.
We don't have to.
I think I kind of want to.
All right.
If nothing else, if we talk about nothing else in the setting, if we're describing the setting, you need to mention Dr. Primoris,
right.
a.k.a. Michael Donegal, a.k.a. Divis Maul.
Right.
Because he's the catalyst for practically everything in this game system happening.
Yeah, from the first inception moments.
And it's a really interesting story. Even if you take nothing away from the game whatsoever, just hearing the story of Michael Donegal is really mind blowing from the standpoint of what do you do when you get a glimpse of what the future could be with superpowers, and you foresee the social implications of all that.
Yeah, I mean the base reality that suddenly you now are different than everyone else to an exponential realization. It is not what a comic book, or at least what comic books used to propose. It was a reality-bending thing for a person to suddenly now have power. And some of those people took that very egotistically.
Yeah.
And selfishly.
Yeah, I would say probably one of the best things about the system, or at least the setting in the book, is all the writing that went into it. I mean, clearly the first third of the rule book is just stories.
And it's good.
And it's really good stories. Some of them were actually written by Warren Ellis of, I believe, Watchmen fame.
Yes.
He also wrote, I think Warren Ellis was also responsible for the Castlevania animation that showed up on Netflix as well.
Oh, all right.
I'm pretty sure he wrote that as well. So for those of you who are fans of Warren Ellis, you want to take a look at the rule book there.
Yep.
So what makes... Oh, Alan Moore did Watchmen. Thank you, Overwatch.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. But anyways, regardless, it stands. The fiction is really good. So what makes Adventure what it is? So it is actually set in the 1920s, when... so you can kind of get a picture in your mind of radio, the television hasn't really been invented yet. Talkies, movies with actual dialogue in them were literally just on the verge of getting made.
Yeah.
Around that time.
Yep.
I think the first color movie was just coming out. I think color and dialogue was what happened right around the same time, if I remember correctly.
As far as this universe, yes, they were a little less compressed than our timeline. There's a little bit more, but as far as where it works.
Yeah, you're just getting into the proliferation of the motor car and stuff like that, and World War I is already it's just behind us, but the scars are still a little fresh.
The villainy is still out there.
The beginnings of World War II haven't quite crept up yet, so you're still kind of in that era. But most importantly, though, this is when a lot of pulp fiction was told. When I say pulp fiction, I don't mean the movie by Tarantino, but rather the actual thing that it's named off of, which is these sort of cheap stories that were on this really cheap paper, hence they called them pulps because it was very pulpy, very raw paper, and low quality.
Yeah.
But the stories were often very heroic, but very also over the top, and lots of adventure that happened in them. Some notable ones are things Indiana Jones is definitely a very pulpy hero.
Yeah, as far as ones we know, yeah.
The Rocketeer.
Perfect example.
The Shadow. The Phantom.
Yes.
Dick Tracy.
Oh, yeah.
I know Knox in the Box in the chat is a huge Dick Tracy fan.
Yep, love Dick Tracy.
He mentions the Spider.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with the Spider myself. Doc Savage.
Doc Savage was huge.
That's another big one. And for a style reference, I will point out Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that
movie was with Jude Law and Gwyneth Paltrow, I believe.
Yes.
Was perfect. Just chef kiss.
Yes.
Just
yes.
Perfect style for adventure.
Yeah.
It was a little more 30s 40s style.
Yeah.
But it was still very.
It still fits
it still
very well.
Pulp as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the entire game system and the storytelling style and everything like that is built around this pulp style. And so the game rules are there to encourage the pulp style type of storytelling. And we'll get into the system in just a little bit, but so I kind of want to just talk about, a lot of people may not know what you're talking about with pulp. I mean, I know we just gave a lot of examples, but what is pulp?
Mm-hmm.
So it's typically over-the-top heroics, but not superheroes. Like, you're definitely going to see some people doing some extraordinary things, but those people are themselves extraordinary, but they're not superpowered. Like, there's no Superman here.
Right.
But you still may have people who are able to lift an exceptional amount, or have, crack shot aim, or, any number of things. Or, Batman is probably the closest to, like, a pulp action hero that we have.
I would 100% agree.
He's not a superhero individual, but he has so many extraordinary attributes about himself.
Hawkeye.
While still being a quote-unquote normal man.
Yeah, Hawkeye.
Yeah. Black Widow.
Black Widow is another good example. You're trying to, and that's why Indiana Jones works so well, is that, like, literally, yes, he gets injured, but somehow he gets through things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the key.
Yeah. And some of these things delved into, like, mysticism, and again, we'll get into those as well, but it was never like, I can fire lasers out of my brain. The Shadow knew ancient mystical arts of how to cloud men's minds, and so he would essentially force them to ignore him.
Yeah.
And so he would be effectively invisible, and hence the Shadow.
Yeah.
But again, he's not. You shoot him, he dies. He's nothing hugely special. But also, these are also defined by, though, a theme of hope. There was always an overwhelming sense that the good guys were good, the bad guys were bad. The villains always got their due at the end of the story. Justice prevailed. The bad guys got captured or subdued, never killed.
Nope.
You don't kill your bad guys in pulp. You tie them up at the end, and you get your good old, like, look into the camera. Oh, good thing we were here to save the day. And the villain says, "I'll get you next time," and that's it.
Yep.
So it's different from noir, in that you're still going to have those bold personalities, but noir also took that, like, dark edge, whereas pulp kind of looks up, noir kind of looks down.
I agree.
It's also not camp. Camp is over the top, but it's over to the top of the point of being silly.
Which, like, Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
Is kind of
campy.
Is campy version of pulp in a way, because again, it's heroes being heroes.
Wah, wah,
right? I'll get you next time, kind of thing. And that actually pressed into cartoons heavily. Was that pulp turned to cartoons?
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, you're starting to think of more cartoon characters, yes. Anytime that there was, a little more slapstick with it, was it mystery cartoons? That's pulp.
Yeah,
really is what it came down to.
In fact, Overwatch says BioShock Infinite was really good pulp.
Yes.
I agree. It was pretty good. It was pretty good pulp. Let's hear. Knox in the Box says, villains also always died by strange turns of fate. Not the hero's fault. Something always just happened because crime doesn't pay.
Or it would be a twist of their own fate. The mountain collapsing on them, or
right. Hoisted by your own petard was okay, but the hero wouldn't kill a villain.
Correct, and in some cases would try and rescue them.
Sure.
And like in the throes of rescue, they may die.
Yeah.
He's holding him, hanging on to him as the blimp is taking off by one hand, right, and the glove comes off.
I'm gonna offer to save your life so you can be redeemed because there's good in everybody. And
right.
The villain might slap your hand away and say, "No, I choose to, go down with the ship."
Right.
Sort of thing.
Yep.
But that's not because the hero killed him.
Mm-hmm.
So the overall setting for the game, though, it kind of takes place in an alternate universe of Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a different world or anything like that. In this setting, there is in those ages where like rich men got together to watch science experiments and stuff like that.
Yes.
I am unveiling my new invention.
Yes.
Sort of thing.
We have brought back Tut, and we are going to take a look at his bones.
Right, right. Where that was like the big news of the time. And so you've got this brilliant inventor named Dr. Hammersmith, and he creates what he believes is going to be a perpetual motion machine, which anybody who knows anything about science knows that is impossible, due to various physics things that I won't get into. But anyways, so he has essentially created an infinite power source, is what he's got. And what it's supposed to do is siphon off this stuff he calls telluric energy, which is a complete made-up pulpy term. I love it.
I think it's fantastic.
Everything makes me roll my eyes so hard about the science in this game, and it's brilliant because it makes me roll my eyes. So it's supposed to pull off this stuff called telluric energy, which is essentially the raw potential of creation of the universe. It's not to be confused with potential energy, which is an actual thing, but like literally stuff that hasn't been created yet, like stuff the universe has not even thought to conceive.
Yeah.
Is what it draws off of.
Right.
And everybody gets together, all these rich people who want to see Dr. Hammersmith turn on his famous machine and change the world once and for all. And it blows up, and it kills nearly everybody.
Yep.
And
very Doc Ock kind of moment.
There's a lot of confusion, and some of the main characters go missing for a period of time, and while they're all trying to figure out what's happening, they realize that the explosion of this Hammersmith machine has released a bunch of this telluric energy into the world. Mm-hmm. And this has caused a number of people, some of which were the survivors of the Hammersmith experiment themselves, to be suffused with this telluric energy and become slightly greater than they were before. Yes. They become what were referred to as the inspired. Mm-hmm. And these are your player characters. These are also going to be like your main villains and such like that in the game. Because good people and bad people got telluric energy.
Yep.
And so that's your setting. And then Maxwell Anderson Mercer, who is a rich philanthropist, does a jaunt through time, because that's what his abilities gave him, sees the future, and sees how great things could turn out with the right guidance for humanity, comes back to the 1920s and declares that he is going to use his grand fortune to begin the Æon Society for Gentlemen.
Yep.
And ladies as well. He's very clear that gentleman is more of a societal term than it is a gendered term.
Right.
But they're very egalitarian. Yes, thank you. I could say that correct.
Yeah.
Egalitarian in their the ways that they exercise the rules and stuff like that. And basically they are there to go out and discover strange new things and find ways to guide humanity to a greater, more inspired future. And so it's this very hopeful, very uplifting.
Yeah, and I liked that about it. At the same time, there's a note that there's other things going on. That the other side isn't necessarily as cut and dry as you would think it would be. Like the tone is there definitely between good and evil. But at the same time, the evil isn't just dumb, silly evil.
Yeah.
They have purpose and determination, and they're at odds for good reason. Mm-hmm. You know, they have depth and breadth, and that makes it different. That makes it intriguing, because now you're like, do I work for the good guy? Am I working at all for the good guy, or am I just doing my own thing? You know, so now it's suddenly gray is pretty much everywhere.
I mean, it's kind of assumed that you'll be part of the Æon Society, but they do actually put forth in the game system several other canon groups that you could be a part of. You could be part of the Æon Society and part of associated with these other groups, or you could just be on your own, doing your own thing. I mean, they sketch out a pretty good world. For, there's heroes and villains and other groups that maybe a little more gray area than that.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things about Pulp that really pulls it together is that it isn't just light and dark. It is this space in between where, maybe the henchman of this place actually moonlights as an informant for one of the good guys.
Yeah, sure.
Because they're friends from childhood. And now there's that area in between. It helps fill the gaps.
It's one of those very tropey sort of storytelling styles I really liked, because it's like your villains had a respectability to them in those days, and you could let the villain monologue a little bit. You could it was
disrespectful otherwise.
You could have a drink with the villain, in some like in James Bond movies. You see him, I want a martini shaken, not stirred, and he goes and he goes up to the bar and just talks to the big bad evil guy, and
or plays a game with him, like cards or whatever.
Tense, but they're kind of eyeing each other, and they have like a standoff, and then there's an implied, once this game is over, the crap's going to hit the fan. But but there's a respectability to it. You
Yeah.
know?
I think another story that kind of has that same feel but doesn't sit in the same setting, Wild Wild West, has that kind of, you look at the villain and you understand them to a degree.
Yeah.
And the conversations that can happen is because you have charismatic characters who understand what's going on, but not everybody's like that.
Right.
Everybody has their purposes, but it's a different type of storytelling, and that's what makes White Wolf different in that sense.
Exactly. So let's get a little bit into what the actual game system is.
Yeah. Okay. So
how
simple enough. What's the dice? Let's start with what we love. What's the dice?
All right. So for anybody who knows White Wolf games, this is going to be very, very familiar to you. The core of it is still White Wolf. Okay. So you still got your 9 attributes, your 3 physical, 3 social, 3 mental. You've still got your batch of skills that go under it. You're going to be filling in dots 1 to 5 on things, and you're still going to be rolling a handful of 10-sided dice.
Yeah, not necessarily a bucket of them.
Oh, no.
But what I'm saying is you can get to buckets.
You can get to buckets because the game sometimes gets so over the top, even more so than World of Darkness.
Yes.
Because they want you to crush the numbers sometimes.
It becomes
in flagrantly heroic ways.
Much like 7C, where the idea of rolling 20 d10 is a thing. Like, it's a heroic thing to be done.
Yep.
Now, you can still have failures within that.
Sure.
It's a little more challenging, but yeah.
But keeping in mind, though, that this also didn't go off of White Wolf's World of Darkness system. There were some significant changes to how successes and such like that were tallied up. And this was what they debuted as their storyteller system. And so ones no longer detracted successes anymore. You had a static target number instead of a fluctuating target number, which was always, I believe, 7. And under certain circumstances, 10s counted for 2 successes. And you only ever botched if you rolled no successes and at least 1 1.
Okay.
So your botches were a lot less frequent than they were in old school World of Darkness. Which, of course, again, plays into the fact that you want your characters to succeed in this particular style of game. So that's the basis for it right there. Now, typically in White Wolf games, you've got a number of clans or kiths or tribes or whatever. Not so in Adventure. You had 3 archetypes for your inspired character. That was either a heroic character, which is a daredevil, a psychic character, which is a mesmer, or a dynamic character, which is a stalwart. Now, that sounds a little bit confusing, but they're actually very, very distinct. So daredevils. Daredevils are my favorite. They are technically not superpowered.
No.
They don't have any abilities whatsoever. Wink, nudge.
Right.
If you witnessed a daredevil doing their work, Indiana Jones is actually a great example of a daredevil. Because you don't look at Indiana and say, that man has superpowers.
Right.
However, he has a hat that never ever seems to fall off his head, and when it does, it always magically comes back to him.
In some way. He can retrieve it.
He has a whip. This whip is magical.
Yeah, very much so.
Wrap around anything at will and unwrap itself at will. It stays
always
wrapped.
Seems to be the right distance.
It stays wrapped exactly as long as it needs to, and it is exactly the length he needs it to be to wrap around something and still have enough slack to give him the distance.
Right.
He can do things like swing from chandeliers, which are not meant to be load-bearing structures whatsoever, which should tear in a shower of drywall entirely out of
plaster
out of whatever ceiling that it is bound to tenuously. The moment a human's worth of weight is put on it.
Right.
But miraculously for him, they're just anchor points.
Yep.
They don't ever budge, and he can just swing away at them.
He can also use it to knock things out of people's hands and steal things from them and tear scars of their bodies, but at the same time, gingerly wrap it around a lady and draw her to him.
Oh, yeah. Not harming a hair on her delicate head.
Or ruining any part of the literally, simple cloth dress that she is wearing.
Exactly. So this is what a daredevil is.
Likewise, he has a pistol that has exactly 6 bullets, but all of those bullets have meaning.
Yes. And so a daredevil will have any number of abilities. Some of my more favorite notable ones from the book are things like Death Defiance.
That's fantastic.
We'll get. Actually, you know what? I'm going to save Death Defiance for later.
Save that one.
Another one, Perfect Privacy.
Yeah.
Perfect Privacy is such a great little ability, but it's so subtle. The flavor, all the stuff in White Wolf books typically has flavor text that goes with it to kind of show you a small, less than a paragraph example of how the ability might play out. And the flavor text for Perfect Privacy is, okay, so it's settled. We'll meet on night.
Yeah. And then the waiter comes over and pours a bottle of something right in front of their face, while they're,
Yes, well, I'm going to try to read their lips. Okay. You see them, you start reading their lips, and they say, all right, so the deal is that we're going to, and a waiter steps right in front of them.
Yep.
May I take your order? Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what basically means is, like, you can't be spied on.
Ever.
Period. Don't ever roll dice unless you're another inspired trying to spy on this person, and even then, it is exceptionally difficult.
Yep.
Like, if you are not an inspired character, it is impossible to spy on this person. Period. And that's a daredevil ability. You can't say that that's a superpower.
No.
But here we are.
It is powerful nonetheless.
It's useful for things like you've got abilities that allow you to like jury rig things. Your character was a daredevil when we played for that short period of time.
Yes.
And your character had one that was like unbeatable odds or something like that, where like you actually became more powerful the more you were outnumbered in hand-to-hand combat.
Yes.
And the flavor text for that was like, oh, is this 3 against 1? That doesn't seem very fair. Go get some friends.
Exactly.
So daredevils are fun because like I said, they're very subtle. And they not even to the level of Captain America, but they're just ordinary, but they're extraordinary.
Yeah.
All right, so then you've got mesmers. Mesmers are more like your the Shadow, the Phantom, the ability to mystically cloud men's minds with ancient, psychic abilities that you learned in the Orient or something like that.
Yeah, it was always vague about how you got them, whether you got them from a book or an ancient tome.
I trained under a Tibetan monk who taught me the ways of the mind.
Right, or you were touched in some way.
Yeah. But the mesmers are essentially proto-psychics. And nothing, again, that is like you're not going to turn into like Professor Xavier at any given time, but you can do subtle things like implanting suggestions or minor teleportation. Like I could maybe swipe a key off of a wall that I can see 10 feet away.
Right.
And conjure it into my hands. Or just deal direct psychic damage to somebody by, implanting, a harsh, psychic attack directly into their brain or something like that. But, they were a lot of fun. They had a lot of really great, really flavorful abilities. And then you have your dynamics. Here's your stalwarts. And stalwarts are, if you know Aberrant, who are the big bad superheroed people, superpowered. Your stalwarts are proto-novas. Probably the best person I can think of for this one is like James Bond, like Jaws.
Yes, I strong, oddly strong,
like able to eat a gun strong.
Odd Job kind of fit in that as well because he could just take a hit from anything, like literally a crowbar bent on him. Mm-hmm. A crowbar.
Yeah.
You know, solid forged metal bends when hit.
But stalwarts of all different walks have some sort of extraordinary physical abilities about them. And it's not always like super strength or super endurance or anything like that. But there's, a certain level of dexterity that's there, a certain level of smarts that's also there. And so these are the building blocks from which you're building your characters. Which brings us kind of to super science, was another thing that was in there. There was a whole set of rules in there for creating super scientific inventions, because having robot servitors and strange potions that did interesting things, and all sorts of stuff like that is or wiring up your car to be able to turn into a boat when you push a button on the steering wheel.
Jetpacks and
the Rocketeer was a good
spring boots and like landing things and like grav gloves and things like that.
Yeah, there was always an element of super science in a lot of these pulp adventure stories. Even like Dick Tracy had like a little radio watch and stuff like that.
That worked everywhere.
Yeah. So you saw it in all sorts of different things, and so of course you're going to have players who want to be able to create this sort of stuff. And so your Daredevils don't really have a super science arc to them. They've got what's called jury rigging,
right?
Which is a special knack for them. But your Mesmers and your Stalwarts both have a track to get super science and become essentially mad scientists. So you can create all sorts of cool things like that. Your major, aside from your knacks, though, your major sort of thing that is your power source is your points of inspiration.
Right.
And so inspiration is it's rare. You're only really going to have 2 or 3 points of it, maybe.
Right.
At character creation, you may build.
It's
up
like
more.
Seven Seas drama. It's less rare than D&D's inspiration, and definitely carries more weight with it, because it can affect more than just it's not just for enhancing your powers.
Right.
It is literally for changing things.
Yeah. Now, I mean, some powers are powered with a point of inspiration. Some of the more
powerful ones. Yes. Yeah. Influential. I think that's a better way of putting it. Yeah.
But one of the biggest uses for inspiration is things what we call dramatic editing. Now, dramatic editing is probably one of your favorite aspects of the game.
Yeah.
So, if you ever read pulp stories, you'll notice that there are just strange coincidences that like you go into a town and you're lost and you don't speak the language, and suddenly someone who does speak the language happens out of a bar just then as you're walking by.
Short round.
Yeah.
You have a contact there.
Or the big bearded guy from the first one.
Yeah.
Asps, very dangerous.
Yes. Somebody in the chat will pull it up. I can't think of it right now.
I don't remember his name, but anyways, you know the guy though. Who just again happens to be there, happens to speak the language.
Right.
That's what your dramatic editing does for you. Like
I liked one of the ones that you first presented to us for dramatic editing, which was that you're trapped in a building, it's on fire because they've got the guy's goons are just outside the doors of the room that you're in. How are you guys going to get out? And someone's like, you know what? I'm going to spend a point of inspiration here. All right, how you doing it? Well, I've got a background in architecture, and actually when I was originally studying architecture, I studied the blueprints of this building, and in fact, there's an old elevator shaft that's right behind this wall that was used to lift a piano up to the 52nd floor, but they never removed it or boarded it over, so if we just go right through this wall, we can go down that elevator shaft.
Yep.
And they're like, it's right there.
Okay, give me a strength check to punch through the wall, and what do you know?
There is.
There is an old elevator shaft back there. And that's it. So what it allows you to do is it allows your players to interject.
Thank you, Overwatch.
Sala. Yeah. It allows the players to interject details into the game to create these odd coincidences. And there's guidelines for, the bigger the coincidence and the more beneficial it is for you. You can't just say like, oh, the villain's gun jams and it shoots him in the head. Or something like that, and we win. It's not that style of dramatic editing, but smaller, more plausible, albeit very coincidental effects, you can just add. Your plane crashes in the Congo, and you're in the middle of the jungle, no food, no supplies, but what you've got on your bodies. Well, I'm going to point 3 points of inspiration into saying that there was an old army cargo plane that crashed just a little bit near here, and it's going to have just enough food and rations to keep us safe for a couple days. Like, oh, what do you know? There it is, covered in vines and everything, Yep.
It's right where you left it.
Right, or you happen to stumble upon it, You guys are wandering through the jungle, and lo and behold, there it is, But that stuff happens all the time in pulp.
Yep.
And so instead of the storyteller being dependent upon just giving you guys a leg up all the time, it leaves that sort of creative opening for the players to be doing that themselves. Now, I told you I would come back to Death Defiance, that Daredevil knack. So, one of the other things you can use your inspiration for is to avoid death. You can use dramatic editing to explain why you don't die in a situation. So what Death Defiance does for you, first off, it requires 8 points in willpower, and that's on a 10 scale, so
it's harsh.
A lort. And what Death Defiance allows you to do is, whereas you would normally only get 2 or 3 points to spend on dramatic editing to save your own life, Death Defiance allows you to use your willpower, which is a minimum of 8 at this point, interchangeably with your inspiration.
Yes.
To explain away your own death.
Yep.
So even if the villain is standing on your corpse, putting bullet after bullet after bullet from an automatic weapon into your head...
Yes.
I would like to hear the story of how you lived.
Yep.
And make it good.
Yeah, I like the ones where it is, well, first off, the rest of the group is seeing this through a doorway, and they can only see my feet. And it's dark in the room, and the light of the gun is flashing.
Yep.
Now, what's really happening is I have moved another person's hand that had fallen next to me right over my face as the gun rips through, and as the bullets are ripping, blood is spattering everywhere, and he thinks he's just riddling me through, but really I'm only taking a few hits, and then the floor cracks right then, and he steps back, and it breaks, and I fall a full floor down, and debris rains on top of me.
And there I lay unconscious for the next 18 hours, forgotten and presumed dead.
And then
suddenly,
a dog shows up licking my face.
And then somewhere in that tale, like, you wash up on a desert island, and, et cetera, until...
Or a group of homeless take you in, and you hide in a shelter, and...
And I know it's been 2 weeks, but don't worry, guys, I'm back now.
Yeah, everything's fine.
With only this scar to show for it.
That's right.
So, it's a lot of fun. Even gets into things like heroic backgrounds. And you wouldn't expect, like, backgrounds would be, like, the place that you would see the heroism come out.
Yeah.
Backgrounds are things like resources and contacts and, like, maybe a sanctum, a place where you can, call your own and whatnot. But there are even background enhancements in this, was what they're called.
Yeah.
They are level 6, and so keeping in mind, backgrounds are on a 5 scale.
Right.
Okay. And, like, 5 points in resources means you are just... disgustingly rich.
Yeah. And you would have, I'm trying to remember how it did for, like, effectively, like, layers. There was something to that where you could have, like, a lab.
Well, we'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
So I'm just using resources as a common one because it's something I think everybody can kind of latch onto. Is like, so the guy who lives, who has 15 Armani suits and has his own helipad and lives in the penthouse apartment of the skyscraper and sees everything that goes on in the city. That guy has 5 resources.
Yeah. I also saw that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There is a 6th point in resources that you can get.
Yep.
And pretty much all of the backgrounds have a 6th point, an ominous 6th point. And like the 6th point in resources is called Wealth Beyond Avarice.
Yeah.
And it's just like that Bruce Wayne level of like, I liked your country, so I bought it.
Yeah.
I rule it now. You can get away with that sort of stuff of like, oh, you need a small loan of $3 billion. Okay,
I'll make a phone call.
I'll see what I can liquidate. Yeah, give me a minute. But then you start getting into things like Sanctum.
Yeah, Sanctum. That was the other
so
one.
Like,
yes.
you would have like a secret lair.
Sure.
And sure, lots of like pulp heroes had secret lairs and stuff like that.
I mean, you have like the Punisher lairs, which were really like old buildings that he had kind of crafted where his space was at. So again, Sanctum was low on that scale.
1 or 2 points in Sanctum, you'd have like an old, a secret area in an old abandoned building.
I think if you got up to like 4, it'd be something more like the Highlanders lair, where it was like, oh, this is an antique shop here, but if I go up these stairs and downed this elevator.
Yeah.
Now I'm in like this ancient, fighting arena that's perfectly equipped and has weapons on everywhere.
Yeah.
And plus tons of artifacts and, perfection thing, in glass cases and
Absolutely.
shit.
That would be like a 4 or a 5.
Yep.
There is a 6th point.
Yes.
Called Sanctum Sanctorum. And it encourages you to just make shit up.
Yep.
Like, if you ever wanted, say, a helicarrier that, like, has its own cloud generator and a lightning cannon to make it essentially look like a storm cloud from any of the untrained eyes, but you've got a whole fleet of like airplanes up there and stuff like that with you,
yeah.
and, a whole crew of people and whatnot. Like, yeah, you can do that. Like, if you wanted a skull-shaped mountain with a volcano and, laser turrets and, ill-tempered sea bass, then you can absolutely have that with Sanctum Sanctorum. Like, it is literally like, make your dream lair and then get a little extra with it, and that's what you've got.
Yeah, you have a underwater base that is only accessible by deep sea sub, which of course you have,
or the deep sea sub itself
right.
could be the Sanctum Sanctorum.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like Captain Nemo's Nautilus.
The Nautilus is a perfect Sanctum Sanctorum.
But there were things like that. There, like Cypher. Cypher was another background in there. It's the ability to have a secret identity, and then once you get up to like 6, it's just like Clark Kent syndrome. You can literally put on a pair of glasses, and people will forget who you were, because you wanted to hide it. And the inspiration in the world, the telluric energy, just says, "Okay, I'll let that happen." And so people just kind of forget that you look totally the same with the glasses, but here you are. And that's adventure in a nutshell. A lot of the all of the storytelling systems in it help encourage the pulp style gameplay,
and that almost super heroic kind of cheer on your players, cheer on their characters. Make it crazy.
And this is a game system really where, like, we've talked a lot about mood and we've said the word hope a lot. There's a lot of games out there where you're going to get into the gritty realism, and it's going to kind of encourage the sort of storyteller versus player environment where you kind of want to beat them and inconvenience them and stuff like that. This isn't it. This isn't the game system. This is the game system. When somebody rolls 18 successes, you're supposed to smile and laugh and say, you know what? That's awesome. Let me tell you just how cool this turns out.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely. We'll say all the things that it's not. It is not tactical. Mm-hmm. There are tactics involved in it, but it is not a tactical game. You're not going to have minis moving across. Your fight sequences are going to go relatively quickly.
Yeah,
they may be long in a dramatic sense, where more goons come in and maniacal laughter from behind, plate glass.
A chase scene where there's goons hanging out, firing their Tommy guns at you while you tip over vegetable carts in their way.
Exactly.
They roll over and somehow explode.
Yes. That was another thing. There was everything explodes.
It's another Daredevil knack, yeah.
Yeah, everything must explode kind of a thing, yeah. And that's the whole thing is that you want it to feel larger than life at all times. That a scene goes from, swanky and sexy kind of movements into something ridiculous. The one of the opening sequences, I think, that Temple of Doom, where it goes from this swanky scene with a singer and gambling to a fight sequence that then leads to a chase sequence, and it just kind of, it's that kind of evolution. You want your sequences to flow and have that kind of level of fun and a little bit of hijinks. Comedy is part of it, definitely, but it's not at the forefront.
I wanted to talk just kind of a little bit briefly just about like some of the characters that were in our game, just to kind of give you an example of like some of the characters that this game system encourages. So your wife Vicky played. I still cannot get over how great this name was. So she was styled off of the Mata Hari, which if you've never heard of this person, look her up. She's amazing.
Yep.
A real life character who was both movie star and spy. And that is precisely where this where Vicky made her character strengths in both charisma and acting and such like that, but also in the clandestine arts, and named her character Gracie Demure.
Perfect name.
Just the perfect name for this character. Another character was proposed, but unfortunately not played by one of our friends, named Dr. Gene Splicer.
Yes.
And I think, like, this is any other game, if somebody said, my character's name is Dr. Gene Splicer, I'd have rolled my eyes, and then I've been like, that's really funny, pick a serious name, though, you know?
Yeah.
This is the game, you pick that name.
Always.
You know?
But one of the things that, like, we kind of, we're saying, you know, this is what the system does. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be a system, if you want, and this is so true, if you have someone who is very rule and order-based, they might have a lot of problems with this system, because it's hard to think about a min-max when really you're playing the max.
Yeah.
Your character is going to be pigeonholed to some maximizing. Mm-hmm. In a direct way. You're leaning into that character's thing. Like, the Rocketeer was a kid with a jetpack, basically.
Sure.
Who was probably a decent scrapper, but not great at it, but could think his way out of problems.
Yeah, he was a daredevil with 6 points in Gadget.
Right.
What he was.
And that's what was good about it. Like, he fixed a problem with bubble gum. Like, that kind of a thing. But the whole idea was that it was meant to be something pigeonholed, whereas, like, someone who's trying to tactically be everything and do everything
is not going to have a good time.
They're not going to enjoy it. If they're trying to think of the best tactical way to get through a scene, they're going to be struggling to try and figure that out.
Yeah, the real fun in this game is kind of forming your team. Mm-hmm. You know, is kind of team building, of going like, okay, like we had your character was Seamus Finnegan, the Irish bruiser.
Yep, that's all he was.
Just a good old Irish bruiser in a bowler cap and with the suspenders and the rolled up sleeves, and that's all he did was he drank whiskey and he punched people, and he was very good at it.
He was very good at this job.
And he was very good at his job. We had Ela Mae Hawkins, which is actually Ela Mae, one of our Patreons.
Yep, is Ela Mae Hawkins.
Is Ela Mae, where she got the name from was Ela Mae Hawkins, and she was the team's wheelman. But she wasn't the wheelman. She was a barnstormer.
Yeah.
She was a biplane pilot.
Who could pilot anything.
But her biplane was her baby.
Yep.
So we had Dr. Lawrence Critcher, who was a cryptozoologist who had I wouldn't even say it was a pet Yeti, because the Yeti really wasn't his pet, it was more of his partner. We had Jingli Zhai, the Jade Dragon Princess, very tropey.
Yes.
Perhaps a bit racist, but very tropey. She had the ancient ancestral green dragon sword that could, like, cut through anything, and, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. And it was just great. Just having everybody had their own little niche. You know, you knew if you had a social situation, Gracie Demure and Dr. Critcher were going to be the high society, highfalutin top hat wearing people to go do that for you. If people needed to be punched, well, you call Seamus. And maybe call in Dr. Critcher's Yeti. He was pretty good at that, too.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Jingli Zhai, of course, with the sword play and stuff. And it was just great.
It was a odd League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of feel without the exceptionalist. I mean, because there was, in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you've got things beyond.
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Right.
You've got a vampire. Yep. You've got, you know.
But if you remove those, you basically have good adventure characters. You have, you know, the wealthy hunter. You know, you've technically got an alchemist who's got some problems.
Sure.
You know,
you've got a super science character.
Yeah.
You've got a combat twink character. In the vampire lady, I forgot who she was. The Bride of Dracula.
Yes.
Bride of Dracula, and then you had the Invisible Man, who could easily just be a mesmer.
Yeah.
With the ability to cloud men's minds.
Yeah, he's always invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he isn't, and he's in the room and you just don't realize it. But his voice, he throws his voice so well that you think he's there. Mm-hmm. You know.
You had Dorian Gray.
Dorian Gray is one that's
he's a stalwart.
He would definitely be a stalwart.
He's a stalwart.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a stalwart with a bunch of like super endurance sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what you're bringing together, this risky group that is weird but fits when adventure calls them.
Uh-huh.
So
So yeah, it doesn't do your tactical stuff very well, and honestly, it's probably the same list of pros and cons as most White Wolf games.
Yeah.
You're not going to do tactical very well. It's a very heavily narrative, heavily storytelling game system.
And I think that's another thing that it doesn't do well, is that if you're planning on going into adventure and running a quick game with your friends as a storyteller, you're going to have to think again. There's going to be an investment here that's a little beefier. I think in a lot of ways, you're not going to be out-thinking your players, but you've got to have a bit more story because they're going to move through it.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that is very different from a storyteller aspect is that much like 7th, like I really have to think about the story and where all of the other elements of the story are going a lot harder scene to scene because it is very much scene to scene.
Yeah.
And those scenes should be crafted and beautiful and incorporate all these weird people being there.
Right. Right.
You're writing stories that are effectively like the TV show Leverage.
Yeah.
And tying it all together, and sometimes that takes a lot. And it can be a little draining.
It's not a game that you're going to deal with the day-to-day minutia like you would in a D&D game. You're not going to be camping and taking watch for the night. It's going to be very much like, okay, so you guys arrive via Zeppelin at the Grand Washington Hotel, and, lights, camera, action from there. So, yeah, you do. I mean, I think if you're going to you can storytell it, however you want, obviously, but I think this is a game that really leans into the theatrics, and it thrives the more extra the storyteller gets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will flat out say it, Sarah, you ruined me for it. Like,
sorry.
I don't know how I'm going to enjoy it any other way, but it was beautiful. It was a great opening to that. I wish everyone would have that. I truly do.
I definitely think when we get done with the D&D campaign that I'm running right now,
back to adventure.
I've definitely got to go back to adventure.
Fuck yeah, that'd be fantastic.
So many people are just waiting, just drumming their fingers at me.
Yeah.
So
worth it. All right, we got questions.
Yeah, we got questions. We got 10 minutes left, so let's
do this.
squeeze some questions in here.
All right.
So go ahead and grab one here.
Nox asks, in our Aberrant game, you banned the power of time travel. Could you talk about the exact issues a DM might run into with this concept and maybe solutions for DMs that do want to include it in their stories?
Yeah, sure. So time travel is it's one of those abilities that just allows you to play around with the story too much. And can cause. I mean, honestly, there's whole genres of science fiction that talk about the repercussions and the execution of time travel and how it works. I mean, hell, Avengers Endgame, or was it? What was an Endgame? It was Avengers Infinity War.
Infinity War.
Was it Endgame or Infinity War? It was in.
Regardless.
No. It was Endgame. They did all the time travel stuff. I mean, they got into it there.
Yeah.
With all the complications and stuff of that of it.
Yeah.
So, honestly, first off, it causes way too many complications if you allow it. But secondly, it's one of those ones where I find that if your player is clever enough, they will always have a leg up on you.
Yes.
And as a storyteller, I greatly dislike my players having a leg up on me. I've had a number of bad experiences with it, and hey, look, good if you can get the leg up on me. That's fine. Like, I'm not saying you can't come up with clever ideas around me and outthink me. That's fine. But I've had a number of bad experiences where players have circumvented me and then just been really smug about it, and I just they just kind of ruin the game for me and kind of ruin the game for everybody by just destroying all the drama instead of leaning into it.
Right.
I'm here to tell a story. Just play the story.
Yeah.
Don't treat my story like a Rubik's Cube and try to disassemble it in the most dastardly way possible so you can feel smug about quote-unquote winning,
Don't troll the game.
And that's what I find time travel allows you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having to deal with things within the story, it allows you to just edit the story however the hell you want. If you're clever enough to. And that's why I banned it.
I agree with it. I've seen it in other games. I've seen how it's been failed. I think successfully, as long as you set very strict rules, you can't alter the future. You can't alter the past to dictate the future. It has to be something in canon. Also, you can't be in the same space that you occupy. Meaning, if you're even in the same room, it doesn't work. Things like that. You set some of those types of rules. then your players get a chance to explore it a little bit and use it as a divination tool.
Yeah.
And that can be different, or leaving things for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get a Bill and Ted's kind of thing.
Yeah. As like a divination tool, or use that, like I'm going to leave the one tool that I need that I don't have right now. Okay, I could kind of see that. But for me personally, I just find that it causes too many problems, and I haven't seen good enough executions to justify its inclusion.
Yeah.
So
let's do one more before we get too far wrapped here.
All right, so Overwatch asks, with games like Adventure that don't follow everyday fantasy or sci-fi tropes, what are some good ways to get players, especially new players, in tune with specific and unique setting? So when going into Adventure, I always suggest my players watch Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a great way to start it. I would say, if it was me, just like 7C, if I was prepping them for a specific adventure type, I would find stories and characters, throw those into a little montage for them. Maybe give them a couple YouTube links to watch and be like, okay, this is what we're going after. And really take session 0 or several session zeros to make sure that their characters fit adventure and fit your world really well so that they can come together. I think it's important, and milk runs are super important for those types of games.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And it definitely sit down. Session 0 is pretty good for when you are putting something this unique in front of them. Really to kind of clear up any of those common misconceptions or questions or things like that. Maybe even like I said, I would always suggest watching Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow just because it is such a great visual reference and such a great storytelling reference for what pulp style is and feels like. Maybe even turn it into a viewing party.
Yeah.
Sit down, talk about pulp, talk about your character ideas, and then watch the movie, and then discuss what your character ideas are, because you might have gotten some inspiration out of it.
So one question that came up, and I wanted to hold it to the end, was that Knox had asked, is Flash Gordon space pulp? Would it fit? And I went and thought about it, and I'm like, I don't think so. He could be an adventure character, but I think it is pulp to a degree, but I want to say it's actually comedy. It's going into campy.
I don't know enough about Flash Gordon, honestly, because I think I don't like camp, and I don't like campy stuff.
It fits pretty camp. I think if you look at the more serious comics of Flash Gordon, yes, it is space pulp. I mean, literally take the space aspect out of it, and it's the same thing. There's no difference. If you look at like what they did with it in live action versions, it is 100% camp.
Yeah,
like they're pushing the nth degree of camp. Like they're playing football in space, sort of. It's really not working out well. So anytime that you've got situations like that, I think that you want to kind of gauge back from the space stuff. It isn't, adventure is not in that area. There are versions of Æon that are definitely sit there, but I think when you start stepping into that, you start stepping into other elements. I'm not saying you can't have aliens.
Yeah, you can have space Nazis from the dark side of the moon. That's fine.
Yeah, but at the same time, you can have alien tech, definitely, be an explained away version of something. So I feel that there's room to work with things like that. But I think to a degree that you've got that. Like John Carpenter and Mars was kind of adventure-y. But at the same time, it's space and it's fun. But keep in mind, it's heroes being heroes against villainy.
Yep. And
that's really the key of adventure. So.
All right, next week we're talking about it's the best way to bring a new game to the table.
Will Rob and Sarah do more system spotlights? What topic will they cover next? Find out next time on Storyteller Conclave. For more great Storyteller Conclave content, consult at @ST_Conclave on Twitter or @ST_Conclave on Instagram. Listen to Storyteller Conclave live every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time at mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. Find out more and join the discussion on Discord at storyteller-conclave.blueberry.net. That's Blueberry, BLUBRRY. Storyteller Conclave would like to extend our very special thanks to our kind Patreons who make this show possible, including Knox in a Box, Sam, and the Arcane Asylum. Tonight's intro music was Moonbeams, as performed by Joseph Samuel's Music Makers. Our outro music is Auld Lang Syne, performed by Prince's Band. As always, our warmest thanks to the families of our hosts, Vicky and Sean, as well as the friends who have graced our gaming tables throughout the years. And of course, each and every one of our listeners. We love you, and good night. This concludes tonight's broadcast.